And now on to the 800,000 federal workers who are still furloughed as the government shutdown persists into day 4. With the economy leaking about $300 million a day, with cancer-stricken Americans being denied access to treatment, and with impoverished families seeing their food benefit lifelines dry up, Republicans in Congress are not backing down from their demands to get something, anything, in return for any deal to reopen the government and raise the debt limit, even if it's not any concession on Obamacare. And this isn't just a stance they're taking publicly. They're taking it in private, too. Earlier this week, an open mic picked up this private exchange between Republican Senators Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul.
Do you have a second?
I'm all wired up here.
I just did CNN. I just go over and over again. We're willing to compromise. We're willing to negotiate. I don't think they poll tested. We won't negotiate. I think it's awful for them to say that over and over again.
Yeah, I do too. And I just came back from the 2-hour meeting with him, and that was basically the same view privately as it was publicly.
I think if we keep saying we wanted to defund it, we fought for that, but now we're willing to compromise on this, I think they can't. And we're going to. I think. Well, I know we don't want to be here, but we're going to win this, I think.
We're going to win. Unclear what a victory looks like in the eyes of these Senate Republicans, who on Wednesday blasted their colleague, Senator Ted Cruz, in a private luncheon, accusing him of not having an actual strategy when he first started this Obamacare fight in the budget. Meanwhile, the Democratic leader of the Senate, Harry Reid, ripped his counterpart in the House, Speaker John Boehner, telling reporters that Speaker Boehner is acting like a coward. Now, this morning, Speaker Boehner responded with this attack against congressional Democrats in the White House.
You know, when we have a crisis like we're in the middle of this week, the American people expect their leaders to sit down and try to resolve their differences. I was at the White House the other night and listened to the president some 20 times explain to me why he wasn't going to negotiate. Sat there and listened to the majority leader in the United States Senate describe to me that he's not going to talk until we surrender. And then this morning, I get the Wall Street Journal out, and it says, well, we don't care how long this lasts because we're winning. Well, this isn't some damn game.
Despite the heated rhetoric and no end in sight for this government shutdown, there could be some good news in the way of avoiding a catastrophic default by not raising the debt limit. On Thursday, the New York Times reported that Speaker Boehner will do what he can to avoid a default, including relying on mostly Democratic votes to raise the debt limit should he be forced into that situation. And he may actually be forced to hold a similar vote to reopen the government, as Democrats are reportedly using a parliamentary procedure known as a discharge petition to bring a clean spending bill to the floor of the House. If Democrats can collect 218 signatures, which means getting Republicans to sign on as well, then they can force a vote to end the government shutdown in as little as 2 weeks. But at this point, still no deal, as hundreds of thousands of federal workers close out a work week without a paycheck. Now, to get perspective from Capitol Hill from a member of Congress involved in this process, I sat down earlier with Republican Representative Leonard Lance of New Jersey, and I started by asking him why he thinks both Republicans and Democrats are to blame for this.
I think that we should fund the government, and certainly we should pay our bills on time. And the fact that the government is now in abeyance, I think, is a failure of all of those who serve in Washington. I would hope that the president would come to the negotiating table, as we Republicans have suggested. On the Republican side, I would have preferred to have a continuing resolution voted in July, and then we could proceed with negotiations from that point. But we are where we are, and I think that we should all sit down at the table, and I would particularly encourage the President of the United States to do so in the spirit of bipartisan cooperation.
What do you make of when Democrats say that they'll sit at the table once the government gets funded? Should negotiations continue as the government shuts down, or should we fix that problem and then negotiate over larger spending deals?
I think we should be negotiating right now. And Majority Leader Cantor has come to the table with other members of a conference. They are our negotiators, and I would hope that Democratic members would come to the table as well. And certainly I think that the President of the United States should participate in these negotiations. Presidents in the past have been involved, and that was true between President Bill Clinton and Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, and I think it should be true in this situation as well.
As far as negotiations go, though, Democrats say they've caved to Republicans on the actual spending number, which is below $1 trillion on this Senate spending resolution. Democrats wanted it above $1 trillion. Given that this is a spending bill, after all, what more do you expect Democrats who control the Senate, the White House, and have 200 seats in the House to give up in this fight?
I would hope that the Democrats would be willing to address some of the concerns we have regarding the President's health care legislation. For example, everybody in America should be treated equally, and that is not now the case. The President's administration has given a year's exemption to big business. This is a Democratic administration giving a pass to big business. It seems to me that that should apply across the board to individuals as well as big business. And certainly in a related area, Congress should live by the rules that are made, and the rules contained in the Affordable Care Act say that members of Congress should go into the health care exchanges. And I think these are rather modest suggestions, and I hope that the administration would at least negotiate on them.
What do you make, though, of people who say this sets a dangerous precedent of governing? Let's turn the tables here. Would you think it was okay for Democrats to shut down the government, to repeal Medicare Part D, or to enact new gun control reform or a public option? Isn't it a dangerous precedent to legislate issues with the threat of shutdown?
I do not favor a continued shutdown, and I hope that there can be negotiations occurring right away. Regarding the issue of the Affordable Care Act, the polls indicate that a majority of the American people at least want it postponed. And so I think, given the fact that that is where the American people are, at the very least the administration and our colleagues in the Senate on the Democratic side should be willing to negotiate with us. And of course, in a negotiation, not all of my views might prevail, and I understand that. But I do think that there ought to be a spirit of cooperation through the negotiation process.
So you're saying the low spending number that's already been offered by Democrats isn't enough of a compromise?
I certainly think that that is a good number, and I am pleased that the Democratic members of the Congress have agreed to that number, or at least some of them have. I'm not sure that that would receive uniform support from Democratic colleagues, but I think that is an appropriate number, and I think that we should recognize that that is the path forward regarding discretionary spending. I would hope we could get back to regular order with the annual appropriations process of appropriating bills for the various departments of government, and indeed that's what we're doing in the House of Representatives with various appropriations bills that we continue to pass over the course of the shutdown.
Congressman, the New York Times reported that Speaker Boehner won't let the nation default, and if we get to that point, he's willing to put a clean debt limit hike on the floor and pass it with a majority of Democratic support. If he does that, would you continue to support him as Speaker of the House?
I have great confidence in Speaker Boehner, and I'm a strong supporter of Speaker Boehner's. And the article in the New York Times today is a reiteration of his publicly held views that we should not default on our obligations. And we have a responsibility moving forward in that regard. And I agree with Speaker Boehner that we should never default on our fundamental obligations. And I hope we do not reach that point, and I'm certainly working with others to make sure that that point is not reached.
So if we got to that point, though, you would support a clean debt limit increase?
I would hope that the debt limit increase could include some reforms regarding the real cost drivers for our federal budgetary concerns. For example, in prior negotiations on raising the debt ceiling,
but that's not a clean. That's not a clean. That's not a clean.
I don't think it's
hike.
Inappropriate to discuss.
That's not a clean hike. We're talking just a clean hike, just to raise the debt limit. If it got to the 17th and that's what we were faced with, would you support it?
I'm sure that there will be discussions as to how not to go into default, and I want Speaker Boehner to be able to negotiate with the White House on that issue. Fundamentally, I believe that we should always pay our bills and always pay our bills on time.
Congressman Leonard Lance, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.